it's like being in music. You know, if you have a lot of time with the aircraft and a lot of time in the sky, you get more comfortable and it becomes more possible. Like I was lucky enough. You asked about the flights in the prairies. I was lucky. I had the tow rotation worked out that I was able to fly on the best day. And Nicole was towing duty that day. She spent 16 hours in the car, so I have to give thanks to Nicole because that wouldn't have happened without her for sure. So, and also that day on the towing, like we got in the air. Andrew's a great pilot. He was actually first person away from the tow road. He got a little unlucky on the line in that first hour where you have to survive, and he sunk out. And like I could see him, and I was like half a kilometer over here. We just did this on the glide line, right? And he was, you know, I was under a cloud that didn't work, and he was in the sun but he was lower. And just the way it worked out is I got up eventually, and he didn't, and it, you know, could easily have gone the other way. And but you know, once the day turned on, I was able to stay in the air. And a big part of a distance flight like that is you have to be comfortable in the air. You have to have your pee tubes, you have to have your drinking, you have to have your eating. I poured a whole bunch of beef jerky on my face because I didn't realize how small it was trying to eat in that flight. But you know, if you don't have that stuff sorted out, if you're not comfortable in your harness, all those things are stuff that we'll talk about. Like those are what you have to prepare yourself for if you want to do a big flight, right? You can't have niggles like that if you want to do a big flight. Like if you're not comfortable in your harness, 8 hours in, you're not going to make it. So, yeah. That actually, the 300K flight actually, you could have probably made it a 400K. It was possible because most of the day there was some little bit of overdevelopment straight down course line, so I would have been gliding at 70 kilometers an hour with bar downline. But I had to go a little bit crosswind to stay away from that with overdevelopment. So instead of having 70-kilometer downwind glides, I had 60-kilometer-an-hour ones. And you know, you think about 6 hours or 7 hours of that makes, you know, that's you know, a bunch of kilometers right there. And also at the very end of the day, it was a blue hole. And if I'd had one more cloud and one more climb, that's another 50 kilometers. Because at the end of a prairie day, the final glides can literally be 30 or 40 kilometers. You often won't hit sync, and you'll be just going downwind at 60, 70 kilometers an hour, and your GPS is saying 19 to 1.
Nice.
So you don't need an R10 to get 19 to 1. You just need downwind. So anyway, I'm going to go back to. We can ask more about specific flights, but I thought I would just cover. I have a very basic PowerPoint presentation, which isn't a PowerPoint presentation, so this is my notes, so you get to see that. General approach to flying. I think if you want to become an XC pilot, you know, it depends. If you haven't got many hours, the first thing you need to work on is just being in the air and thermaling above Woodside and getting comfortable doing that. Going XC, you have to have spare mental capacity, and if it takes all of your capacity to handle your glider and just the thermal, which it does when you're new, right? Like, you know, when you see a new pilot, they're looking down the cardboard tube. You know, Jim knows this well, right? And they can't see much around them. And as you spend 50 hours in the air thermaling, now you can see what other people are doing. When I'm climbing, I'm thinking about climbing a tiny bit, and I'm thinking about the glider a tiny bit, but I've got a lot of other effort and time to think about who's doing what and where they're going up. You know, should I go, is there a cloud forming? And when you're new, you won't have that much extra mental capacity to do that. So the secret to that is you just have to go out there and spend a lot of time thermaling, you know? So if you want to go XC, you know, you probably need a minimum of, like, when I was hang gliding, I don't think I went XC probably until I had 40 or 50 hours at the local site for sure, you know? You know, I might have did a downwind glide or something to a new landing field, but it's a good idea to try to put in a bunch of time and expand your local site. Don't just use the 1 or 2 thermals. Try to find all the house thermals at your local site.
Thank you.
And sorry for the hang gliders. Some of this will be paraglider specific, but I will try to include hang glider points of view here and things, even though I'm not really current on a hang glider. But for paragliding, guys, kiting makes you better. It is a free simulator. Every other form of aviation would give their left nut for kiting, right? Like they spend tens of thousands of dollars to put people in simulators like for 737s. You can take your paraglider out to like Steveston or Vanier and kite and get so much benefit. Like when Jim has a student who spends a lot of time kiting, I've sent some friends to him that I've taken out kiting. He's like, oh, it's so relaxing because they pull the wing up on launch, they're comfortable with it, they turn around, they have a good launch. If you have a bad launch because you're not a good launcher and you don't kite, it's a really hard place to start to have a good flight. And I probably have 2,000 or 3,000. I probably have more hours kiting than I do actually flying. And I think that's a good ratio, especially for a beginner. You know, I got hurt once and I wasn't comfortable with the glider for a while. I just went kiting. I had a paraglider, didn't really want to go flying it high, and I was in New Zealand on a trip, and I tweaked myself, and I just went to the beach and I kite for like 100 hours, you know? And it's always served me well, because getting off launch and being smooth, like if someone can kite really well, they're good in the air. I've never seen someone who can kite really well be ham-handed and bad in the air. You know, it just doesn't happen. People always, like a good friend of mine, Chris Mueller, one of the best pubs we've ever had, people always thought he lives on Cochrane. He gets hundreds of hours a year. Well, they've obviously never been to Cochrane. Cochrane generally isn't very soarable, and it's troughs and all kinds of weird things. But here, Chris would be out there kiting his boomerang, whatever, comp glider, and walking along the fence line, right? And then he'd go to a PWC, and I was working with him, so I knew, oh yeah, he had 30 hours this year. He went to a PWC and he placed second. And all the Frenchies are like, oh yeah, he's flying all the time, you know, and I'm like, no, he was teaching all the time, and when it was blown out, he'd go kiting and we'd watch, right? So that's how important kiting is. I just can't tell you, if you're not kiting a lot, you're hampering your progression. And yeah, get the right glider. A hotter glider will actually, you know, make you progress slower, right? Like the quality of the low Bs now is so good that everyone should have a low B, you know, and fly the heck out of that. Get a couple hundred hours on that category of glider. You know, you could pretty much have flown the flight I did on a low B. Like I had a high B, which wasn't much, you know, it's not that much difference. But really, the performance now, like new pilots are really spoiled. You know, if your first glider is a Geo or whatever, you know, or a, you know, you're lucky. You know, if you go back to what we all flew when we started, they were garbage, you know, and there's no reason even an ENA school glider can fly 100 kilometers. So if you're sitting there going, I'm sinking out because of my glider, unless the glider is way too big or way too small or something, it's not really the case. So, yeah, and getting your harness set up, like these are all the steps that, not just for cross-country flying, but for just successful flying. Like, go sit in a simulator, set it up. Like the number of people when we do the parachute repack that I see them sit in their harness, and I'm like, that doesn't look right. They're kind of crunched up, and their speed bar's not hooked up, and I'm just like, and you've been flying that? So, you know, those things are important. Having done some teaching, we actually used to sit people in their simulators because it would actually, you know, you'd see them try to get in and out of their harness and realize that they had problems that were going to hamper them right off launch. They couldn't even get back in their harness easily, you know. And you can sort that stuff out. It's part of doing your homework. So, yeah. And for bigger XC, you know, just getting all your gear sorted, and just for flying, you know, like I wear goggles. Goggles have really helped me because my eyes don't get dry. I land after a flight and I don't have that, like after that 8-hour flight, took off my goggles and my eyes felt fine. And, you know, even with nice tight fighting sunglasses I used to find with all the speed now, that I get kind of, you know, that caked up stuff in my eyes, you know, and you'd feel a little bit tired. I don't feel that anymore. That makes it much easier to fly 8 hours because you're not wanting to land because you're thrashed. You know?
You're talking ski goggles? Or?
Yeah, yeah. Especially with, like, you know, with flying on speed bar, because pretty much when you're flying more advanced XC, you're like, if you're flying straight, you're on speed bar. So you've always got 40 plus kilometers an hour wind. So that's a lot of wind to just have sunglasses. Yeah, and as I'm saying here, you know, getting out flying is by far the most important factor. You know, you can read books, you can watch videos, you can pay for courses, you know, but the reality is you need to get out flying, you know, like, and, you know, like down here, I think I covered it in some of my notes. It's just, if you're flying less than 50 hours a year, you should definitely be on an ENB, probably a low B, you know, and this is very paraglider specific stuff, but even when I was hang gliding, like I remember I flew a Vision Mark IV for a long time, and I flew that thing until I had a 100-mile flight, and then the best time to step up to a glider is when people are going, hey, why are you flying that glider still? Why don't you have a hotter glider? If you're stepping up to a glider and your friends are like, oh really, you're doing that? That's not usually a great sign. They're like, oh, you're going to an ENC, are you? Didn't you just have a kid? Like you're going to get out 20 hours next year? So. And like we're really lucky. Our local sites are actually great XC training grounds, like Woodside and Bridal Falls in the Fraser Valley. Like fantastic places to learn to go XC. I can think of so many places around the world where they don't have anything like that. They've either got coastal stuff or they've got Golden, which is great, but Golden's super strong. I usually show up there and I'm like, okay, game face on. It's a big day in Golden, right? And then I see some guy from Calgary and he's like, hey, I haven't flown this year. What do you think about today? And I'm like, I think it's going to be full on, So, Woodside, with the clearing days of Woodside, like we fly almost all year round, I might skip a little bit, seems a little bit out of. So in terms of preparing yourself for XC, try to make sure you've done a bunch of actual thermaling at your local sites. Maybe, if you're flying in the Fraser Valley, I'll use the Fraser Valley as an example. Are there any Pemberton pilots here? Mostly Valley people. So everyone here is pretty familiar with the Valley, right? Like, I would say, flying at Woodside, flying at Bridal. If you got to the point where you're both having good soaring flights at both of those places, then you want to start covering things like, go look at a couple other LZs. And this is especially important for hang gliders. Like, if you've been flying Woodside for a while, you probably have landed at Jim's place, or sorry, the ranch, pardon me. You probably land at the ranch, or you've landed at Riverside, you've landed at both. Maybe consider looking at Bill Best Field, or also like if it's windy, it's closed.
It's a cornfield now.
And also, have we still got Harvest? They have good poles up there.
No,
They just cut the grass. Harvest is good now.
Right on. Well, Harvest is a great option, and if you've never been over the back of Woodside, it's essentially a little bit like a mini XC. It's the first, the word they call your first XCs is untying the apron strings. You're not tethered to having to go to that landing zone. And for a hang glider, like your approaches are a bit more critical, like going and actually having a look at the field. Martin was talking about that, actually walking the field. And for paragliders, if you're not sure, if you arrive early, go have a look at some of the other LZs, because it doesn't hurt you. Like, I've done that with some of the Tiger Country flights. I've gone and hiked into places. Can I actually land in here if I sink out, And can I walk out? And it makes the difference between sort of feeling like you've done your homework or you're actually just going to have to land in a tree and call for search and rescue. Yeah, so you can definitely untie the apron strings, and even if it's just one field over, and actually Bridal is super, like, Bridal, if you haven't done what we used to call a SAMI, and I still call a SAMI, which is basically flying from Ludwig, which is at the east end, and then all the way back up past Cheam to the launch, and then to not just Gloria, but to Elk. That's actually a 20-kilometer run. And if you launch at launch and you go and touch both of those turn points, you've done a 40K out return. And that's, and you've also been, the farthest you are away is like 12 kilometers, right, from launch. So the retrieves are negligible. And, the number of times people land out at Bridal is really, really low, right? You can fly there for a month and not hear about someone landing outside the LZ. So it's a great place to go and do your first cross countries. And if it's windy, make it a shorter SAMI. Don't try for the Ludwig turn point first, because coming around Cheam can be windy. And actually, I'm not just going to talking heads it, but I will, put up some maps, and then if people want to ask me questions about the various things, we can show on a map, some of the points that I consider, tight, windy areas and Venturis. Yeah, and then I think you guys did RAFs covering. You guys looked at RAF last time, is that right? Someone said? Do people want to look at things like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we did Rust, but there are new people here, so it's a good idea to do it again.
And I was going to say also, like, there's a host of other things that you can improve. Like, if you are unfortunately saddled with a 9 to 5, 5-day-a-week job, you can do things like this is what I was doing today when I should have been working. I was looking at XC Fine to see where my girlfriend flew, and so, and you can pick up a lot from this. It's not just a way to torture yourself. I looked at the RAS, and I figured, oh, look at that, they stopped here. And why did they stop here? It was windy, I bet, because I know that getting from this mountain across North Creek is quite difficult when it's windy from the southwest. And oh, they landed here rather than at the LZ. That's probably because it's either Whistler Expressing, which is a wind we'll talk about later. And sure enough, she said it was blowing 60 kilometers an hour in the Pemberton LZ at one point today, right? Which is why they all went and landed down here. So that's another thing you really want to know when you're an XC pilot is like, what are the common winds? What are the common problems? And by watching it online, you can actually pick up a lot. Like if you turn on everyone's track logs. If I go and look at where did Andrew go? Andrew had a very similar flight. Looks like a carbon copy, doesn't it? And he didn't land back to the main LZ, right? So, and XC Find you can. I don't usually always use satellite. I just use the terrain map. I find that a little easier. And I think this is a very powerful tool. And if you've got a spot, definitely get your spot registered on XC Find because trying to look at people's tracks if they're all on their own little web page is much harder than having them here. So once you start doing XC, I'd really recommend you get either an InReach. I guess
is that real time? Or is
it's
it
10 minutes late.
Does
Yeah.
the Garmin/InReach work on that as well?
Yeah, you can. So if you look at Andrew's spots, they'll actually have altitude in them, I think. Maybe the last one only has altitude, but I'm pretty sure he uses a Garmin.
Alex, your food.
He uses InReach,
Yeah.
and then you can set your spot for even 5 minutes per segment, which I have, 5 minutes.
Well, have a look at Jim Araba. He set his up to be 5 minutes, and look at the density there. Right. So if you buy a spot, definitely buy the live tracking, and without live tracking for paragliding, just having it on your cockpit. Like if you have a really bad accident and you can't call for help, this will still get them very close to you, right? Because hopefully it'll have been working. But if you just have it on your cockpit and all it looks like when you like Peter isn't working today, right? Like he just had one on launch, but I can easily see not if you had a crash somewhere and you're laying on top of your thing, not being able to get to it and then getting no points. So definitely buy the live tracking if you're going to have a spot or any of those InReaches or anything like that.
So would you recommend Spot as being, when do you buy that if you want to go cross country?
If you start getting to the point where people are chasing you and people are wondering where you are, and your cross countries are maybe out of radio comms. If you're just doing like stuff at bridle, probably not as critical. Like if you can stay in radio communication with the landing zone at all times, like you can at bridle, and it's probably not as key. But if you go
What if you don't have a radio?
that what I would definitely recommend. Yeah, that's another thing. That would go back to sort of the doing your homework and getting your gear set up. Like I would say, have a radio, have it mounted in a way that people can hear you. Whatever you have to do to get a wind mic on there, like a cover so people can hear you. Getting that stuff sorted out is really key because especially as soon as you're leaving any distance, you want to have that stuff working.
Now for XC, you need to have the Hagar. Should you have also an airband radio?
Airband radio is not a bad idea in some places. Only a few people have them. I don't think it's a total requirement. I would say really, if you want to get one, go ahead. I wouldn't stop you for sure. In Australia they're using them and stuff, but definitely the more important thing to me, I'd rather see people with spots than with airband radios, right? Yeah, like even in Pemberton, most of the time with airband, we're better off just calling them and saying, hey, there's a whole bunch of us flying, you guys haven't closed the airspace for any reason, like for fires, they don't really want us talking on the airband radio to ourselves. Like I think in Pemberton, the helicopter guys, they were kind of talking about wanting us to have airband, and then we told them, so do you want 30 people on it? And they were like, God, no, right? So it's going to be your second radio, because you're going to want to still talk on your ham radio, but you're, like for all the basic communications and hey, where are yous? The airband radio would just purely be for communicating with other aircraft and the tower. So, yeah. And just to go back to, just to cover a little bit about some of the specifics of flying in the Fraser Valley, like I think a lot of people don't realize, especially if they're rusty and they haven't been out for a while, that it's actually totally possible to have a good thermal flight at like 10:30 or 11 at Woodside. And some of the days when it's going to get windy later in the day, that can actually be the nicest flight. So if you haven't gotten out for a while, and this is like hang gliders, paragliders, anyone who hasn't gotten out, go out there early, especially if it's a, you know, later in the season. The cycle is generally the inflow comes in and makes Woodside quite windy afternoon, right? And so if you show up at Woodside in like August at 2 o'clock, you're probably not going to fly, right? Unless you're really like high wind launching, right? So if you show up early, you can get a flight and you can brush some rust off, you know, and then if it gets too windy, you can go to Bridle maybe and have a flight. So you have to understand the cycles of how it works. And, you know, like I mentioned the midday winds at Woodside. You know, many times, you know, later in the season, it might be flying early and flying late. That's the cycles of the seasons is that is quite a bit different in April, right? You're not going to get those kind of strong valley winds in April, and you'll find that most of the cross-country enthusiasts are most interested in flying in April at Woodside.
We're getting the August winds now.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Like this whole year's been weird.
Yeah, so they're already getting strong inflow, but anytime you see the Fraser Valley with no clouds.
Yeah, we had that on Friday, was it? Yeah.
Anytime you see inflow and no clouds in the Fraser Valley, the chance that it'll be really blown out at Woodside midday is really high. And I'm surprised at how many times I show up at Woodside and I see people setting up, and it's like, wow, you're here late, you know, and it's getting windy. What are you doing here, you know? And I'm like, why didn't you get out here earlier if you wanted an easy flight? So you really, and for paragliders, it's not so much of an option for the hang gliding crowd, because Bridle isn't a very friendly hang gliding launch. But like Bridle, especially midsummer, I often see Woodside as a spring site for XE, and a really good, in a better fall site than Bridle. And Bridle in the middle of summer is usually my go-to in the Fraser Valley, just because it doesn't get quite as strong a wind, and Bridle turns on quite late in the year compared to Woodside. Like Woodside, you can actually fly around so it almost faces southeast, so you can launch early in the day, right? If you want to do an XC in April, that's really handy. Where you can't do that at Bridle. You can't launch at 10:30 at Bridle and go up, you know, not unless there's some wind and it's just a ridge soaring flight. So try to understand those seasons, and when you see certain people going, they're like if you see me at Woodside, if it's a summer day and I showed up there early, you'll often see me landing, and I'll see people going back up the hill, and I'm like, it's like 12:30. Why are you going back up Woodside? I'm going to Bridle, and I'm a more experienced pilot than you, and you're a newer pilot looking for a mellow flight. You're not going to get it here right now. They should be going to Bridle as well. So you want to understand those seasons and how different sites work at different times of the year and different times of the day. It's really important, actually. And you, when you're a newer pilot, like listen and watch what some of the more experienced guys do and why they do it. And also that cycles thing too, like I would say the Fraser Valley, the best flights are usually the days that are clearing days. It rained the day before, and this day has a 30% chance of showers. It might start out a little bit rainy. The number of times I have driven out to Woodside and had rain on me, and got there and had an amazing day is huge, right? And I'm still driving out going, man, maybe I overcalled this. Maybe it's not going to clear up, right? And you know, you'll get out there and have a great flight, or you won't get out there and you hear that Jim was flying all day. It was actually really nice. So clearing days at Woodside are an absolute key. You know, if you wait for SUNNY in the forecast and you want to see 5 days of sun, you probably won't get the best out of Woodside or the Fraser Valley. And that's really important to understand. I know experienced pilots who you know, my friend Greg, who always calls it the Fraser Valley, and he's not here so I can say bad things about it, he always shows up on sunny days. And I'm like, what are you doing here, Greg? You know, you should be going to Pemberton. So I don't understand. Yeah. I mentioned the Sammy. That's a great XC trade route that you can do at Bridle. Yeah, and you know, at Woodside, I would say the trade routes at Woodside are harder than the ones at Bridle for sure, right? Like, if you want to do flights from Woodside, like a Raymont Triangle, as Jim calls it, or crossing over to Sasquatch and going west, there's big valley crossings, so it's much easier to dirt, right? Like, I'm always like, you know, I could dirt on the first glide of today, you know, if I'm going to Sasquatch. So, you know, you can go to Agassiz, that's quite easy. You can go to Bear, that's usually not so hard. But from Bear to Ludwig to cross the valley or some of the other things, quite a bit more challenging. You need a fair bit of day quality to do those kinds of things. But hey, if you fly to, you know, Seabird Island, and that's one of your first cross countries off Woodside, that's still a 20+ K flight. That's still really worth doing. And I can actually cover that one. I'll also show you with, this is XC Planner, and it's a super powerful tool. That line is my record flight. You can actually take your flights and you can drag and drop them onto the map and it will show you, right? So like, I just happen to have that as an IGC file and dragged and dropped it onto the page and it shows it. So it's really useful, but these little lines over here, I'll zoom in and I'll show you what they do. But while I'm talking specifically about the Fraser Valley, so there's Woodside, there's Sasquatch. Can everyone see that? Is that not too hard, folks? So there's Woodside, we got Bridle over here. And so I'm just saying, you know, for your first XCs, how many people here haven't done XC yet? Or wouldn't, yeah? And how many people have done sort of short XCs, like 20, 30 Ks and want to do more? Yeah. And how many people feel fairly confident in XC and have done 50+? Yeah, so that's... Right, so like, for those folks who haven't done an XC, you know, here's Woodside. If you're soaring around Woodside, you can totally go over to Agassiz Mountain, which is really on the same ridge. And if you do it early in the day, on the way to Agassiz Mountain, you're actually going to get climbs. If I leave Woodside at about, you know, any decent hour, 1 or 2, like not too late in the day, this side gets southeast sun, right? So it's actually quite hot. And on the way over there, I'll usually get a climb here, maybe even a climb here before I even get to Agassiz Mountain. Like, I wouldn't recommend it, and if there's any west wind, you need to leave a little higher, but Woodside is surprisingly rotor friendly. I've gone over the back at 900 meters and 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers of wind and not get rotored. I wouldn't recommend that. I would suggest you try to get to 11, 1200 meters before you go over the back of Woodside for the first time. The only challenge with this is that there's a bit of airspace here. Actually, I can turn on the airspace, I think, here. So you see this little circle here? That's actually the prison, and it has a CYR, so it's restricted, but it's quite low, right? I think it's only 350 meters. That's like 1,300 or 1,500 feet. So you have to be really low to be in it, right? If you leave here at 11 or 1,200 meters and get some lift on the way here, you can fail to get a climb on Agassiz and still bail over, and as long as you land over by the 9, you're out of it. This other thing is something else. It's not the CYA is just this oval shape here. Technically, when you land over here at Harvest, you're awfully close to the CYA. They're never going to care if we land on this side of number 7, right? They're worried about people flying over, dropping drugs, landing helicopters in the prison and taking people, right? So don't get too worried about, you know, crossing this far corner, right? You're a long way away, right? It's when you directly overfly the prison or you're sinking out here and then you go out and land in front of the gates, which people have done. So please don't do that.
They keep you in for a few days?
I've never done it, but they did have words with people. And to continue, like, you know, if you're a new pilot, you know, you're going over here, and then the next one is Bear Mountain. I would suggest when you cross to Bear, same thing. You want to be above the peak, so you want to be 1,200–1,300 meters at least, as high as you can get, basically. On your first XCs, don't be in a rush. One of the biggest mistakes new XC pilots will make is they follow people from below and behind, right? So let's say you're flying with someone who's more experienced, and you've gotten out there with them. Great, that's awesome. You're flying with someone, you can get to see what they're doing, you can see where they go. But you don't want to make the mistake of trying to keep up, and they leave high at cloud base and you leave low, and then all of a sudden they get a great glide, you get a poor glide, and now you have to find a landing zone. So, you know, do try to get up as high as they got before you leave. That's actually, that holds true all the way into competitions. If you're trying to chase people from behind and below, it doesn't usually work for very many glides before you're in a bad spot and you get stuck. So, and yeah, once you're well over Agassiz Peak, you can go to Bear. I usually arrive on Bear, like I'm getting quite specific. Let me know if that's too specific for folks. But don't forget the wind goes through here, right? Especially later in the day. When you're above Agassiz, like this is why you want to have a fair bit of airtime, because when you're thermaling confidently and you can look around, you can be watching the wind. And I usually will see the west wind starting to push off the beach, and it'll be glassy up on Harrison Lake further up, and you'll see the west wind pushing onto the lake if you get there at the right time. And so it gives you an idea of how windy it is. Later in the day, that west wind will push way up, and there'll be kite surfers up at the bay there, right? So having that level of observation is really important, because if you land in Harrison after 1 or 2, it can be really windy. I would not recommend it. But by going from Agassiz high enough, if you're well above the peak and you go here, what I would suggest is get up in this area. Don't go over to here, because then you're too much in the wind. There's more chance that you'll end up landing down here in the wind, right? So go a little bit more over here, and if you actually don't get up, go and land out by Seabird, right? Martin Nowazowski seems to love landing at Seabird, doesn't he?
Not really. Next landing at back to Bridle on the inside.
So it's quite nice to land out here. You don't have anything like the Venturi and the wind here. So, and if you go here and you get anything, then you'll be able to make Seabird quite easily. Right? And I'll just follow around the triangle. Like this is something that I would say for a newer XC pilot would be quite tricky. I would say that, especially now at this time of year, I wouldn't actually recommend trying to cross from Bear over to Ludwig. These two parallel gully features right behind this little mountain, they're kind of where you arrive when you cross from Bear. The problem with now is that the river will have gone up, and normally you can land in spring. You can land on sandbars here and actually walk out. Right now those sandbars, if they're still there, are not connected to the mainland anymore. So if you land out on Hurlin Island, you need a boat, right? In April, the reason I love April so much is, one, there's less wind, and you get all these river landings. You can land on the side of the river on a huge sandbar. You can land a 747 out there, and there won't be much wind in April. So if you do get here, you know, you can get up from stupid low on these things and then climb up to Ludwig. Ludwig is the end of this ridge. It's the end of it in my mind, because once you get past here, you can see how the valley narrows up. It pushes out on this side and it pushes out on this side. So the wind at Peters Road, there's an exit over here called Peters Road, gets a lot worse. I would never recommend landing there. Just to give you an idea, like I've flown to Hope a fair bit, and it's a lot windier as the valley gets narrower. You can land in this area called Laidlaw. If you land right in Laidlaw, you're not bad. If you land at the corner, then you're in more of the Venturi, and it's really windy. I know someone who got pushed back and landed on the railroad bridge at Hunter Creek here.
You know somebody?
Someone.
You know somebody.
Live with someone.
An unnamed person,
Unnamed pilot.
unnamed pilot.
An unnamed pilot who's my girlfriend. Yeah. So,
Alex,
yeah.
what's the transition altitude from Bear that you typically like over to Ludwig?
1400 Yeah, and that's with with a decent glider and a pod harness. And don't forget, this glide's almost entirely crosswind. These are the kind of times where you're, as a more experienced pilot, you're definitely going to be wanting to be on speed bar. Like all the modern gliders go well enough on a paraglider that, if you're gliding, with hands up and you're trying to make distance and there's any amount of crosswind or you want to have, I call it comfort bar, like third bar, quarter bar even is a useful number, but up to half bar is fine, and I think people have a tendency to think of their bar as a binary thing. They're like, I don't want to use the bar unless I'm in trouble. No, that's not how you want to see it. You want to get used to using more and more amounts of it and understanding how the glider flies and how much bar you can fly in.
Just a couple things too. 1,400 meters, sandbars if they're not there, but aim for the rock quarry coming to Ludwig. It's right below. It's the right way to point at.
Yeah, there's a
right
rock quarry.
After the rock quarry, just behind the bump, there's the highway actually opens up, and there's a little landing field that you can land in there, and it's right between the east and the west of the highway. And when you sink out, like dirt right there is. When you dirt out, it's a perfect little landing strip if you don't make it. It's much better than trying to push forward or land anywhere else. Don't get intimidated. There's not any.
There's he's talking about the also there's the rock quarry. This area is, I would consider, not a fun landing field because there is a power line behind it, a small one. It's plenty long enough, and I've been lined up for it before, and I haven't actually landed in it yet. But it's like I was down at 200 meters here the other day and got out, which is I was quite surprised to get out from that height. But you can land there, and just keep an eye, if you're going in there, you want to be looking at the wind on the trees. You want to have an idea of, hey, I'm low, what am I going to have to do? If it's early in the year and there's sandbars out here, you might be like, no, that's too low to go in there. I'm seeing some wind. You might want to play it safe and land out there. Cross country it's something you work into, right? Going out here, let's say it was April, let's say you didn't get a good enough glide and you went out and landed on a sandbar and walked out and you called a friend and got a retrieve. That's a victory. That's a really good flight. You made a bunch of really good decisions. You maybe didn't have enough height on your leaving, but you chose a safe landing field and you knew when to go for it. If you take that flight and you push into here and have a scary landing on here and some wind, that's something you want to avoid, and there's times where, pushing out and landing somewhere like that is a fantastic move,
What are the fields for hang gliding over there?
Nothing other than the sandbars when you can walk out.
So we shouldn't go there.
Well, early in the year, you could totally do it because you could actually drive out here if you had a four-wheel drive, probably. I don't know how, I see people out there with four-wheel drives all the time, but that's an April thing for you guys, for sure. Martin doesn't seem to care because he presses that button and makes his glider go up. I'm calling that cheater thing, Martin. So and now we'll look at the bridle run a little bit. I know this may be review for some of you guys, but the launch and bridle, it's just over here, so it's kind of in the midpoint of that whole run, and that run is basically from Elk down here. There's Gloria, the old upper launch is up here somewhere, and down here is Ludwig. If you go past Ludwig, you're probably not coming back if there's any westerly, right? So, in fact, I would say when you're newer, take everything in bite-sized chunks. What I would actually suggest is you fly around, you get up, and then you go out to just Gloria, and just go to what I call the shoulder of Cheam, right? So there's the Cheam Peak, and there's these quite steep, big gullies, and they stick out a fair bit. Don't go past these. This is where that last good landings for hang gliders and paragliders are. It's just down here at the last interchange. And there's like a dirt bike track here. So you can land everything west of that, right? But on the other side of that, the landing fields aren't so good. So really, if you go to the shoulder and get up high there, well, you got a good chance of visiting the mountain. And that's great. That mountain's a 7,000-foot mountain. If you can get up high enough on this bump to go and have a look at it, that's an awesome flight. If you go past there, the wind, you're almost always got a wind coming back. To get around this corner is quite a bit more work. right? On a modern glider, it's not the end of the world, but if you're not used to flying with your speed bar, getting through here, it's a little bit more tricky. I've been nailed. I came around, I was going from what we call the lakes over here because of the lakes behind them. It's a big green slope and it really pumps. It's an awesome place. This is one of my favorite places on the whole run because 90% of the time when I'm flying this run, I get my highest on the whole bridle run at the lakes. And it doesn't have a big rock face or anything. It's just out of the wind, it faces into the sun nicely, and you often beam out there and it sets you up for a little bit of a speed bar push to get around onto the windward side of the shoulder of Cheam. But what I would say for a newer pilot, don't even go past Cheam. You can see Cheam behind you, it's the big 7,000 foot mountain, just go over to Cheam, go over to Gloria. If you can play in that zone for 20, 30, 40 hours, that's a really good place to play. And then as you get more comfortable, you can go further.
What's the ridge line to the southeast of Raymont?
Let's see.
It's the lakes.
You're talking this one?
To the southeast. Other side over the back.
Like this one, Lady Peak?
Yeah.
Well, I've flown all the way from, because we hiked up from Spoon Lake, and when we flew all the way down to Foley and then flew back and then actually flew across the top line at Woodside. But that was a classic day where it's like late in the year, right? And we've hiked up here, and it's totally stable in the Fraser Valley. Like people were struggling to stay up on Woodside, and it was really good in the high mountains, right? I can't think of almost any time I've seen people flying the front range and then going over to here. Because you could, for sure, but the number of days that you're going to get that high, because it's actually quite rare to get above 7,000 feet on the front side. And a lot of times when we do, it's spring, and then this whole area is in a lot of snow, right? So thermal development, if it's really snowy, might not be as good. This whole side will be bare, but this is a much higher ridge line, right? So you don't generally see people launch here, go over here, and then that way. You know, it's a good question. I've thought about it, but it's quite difficult to come back over this ridge. If there was anything problematic with that, you could be trapped.
When you're talking about the eastern end of the run, you're talking a little bit about Elk and the western.
Yeah.
Because that's a real fool's paradise.
Yeah. Martin makes a really good point. And please, yeah, guys, the experienced pilots, help me out if you see me missing an area which is sketchy, because so this is, I'm just going to zoom out one more time so you can kind of get an idea of where it is. So launch is just over there, right? And then you've come along and you've gotten out to Gloria. It's got a small rock that sticks out. Everything here works kind of as you'd expect it, but when you get to Elk, the interesting thing is that if you go around the other side and go over to here, because hey, it looks sunnier,
Beautiful.
you're probably not coming back, right? Because I think the way the Fraser Valley works is on most of the inflow days is there's actually like more pressure on this side of the valley, and also this is quite a funnel. Like you don't really want to land in the Chilliwack Valley almost any day after about 2 o'clock. It really blows in there. And what happens is that the wind always, even though this is the shady side, till quite late in the day, the wind will actually be coming from here and blowing along there. So you do actually just you stay on this side. You might even push out to here, but you really need to get your climb on this side. If you go around the corner, there's a little hiking rock, which you'll see all the hikers at. Once you start getting that high and you're getting up to the summit, I have gone over here, and it's almost always been a mistake. You know, you're getting to cloud base here, like let's say it's a really good spring day, you're at cloud base here, and you're like, oh, I'm going to chase one cloud further back, and then you barely make it back out from 1,700 meters.
The most chatty pilot on the radio that gets around the corner gets very quiet. You usually don't hear from them for quite a while until they sneak back around the corner. I'm just climbing back up.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, you know, and that's why I didn't recommend going to Elk initially, because there is a bit of a glide from Gloria, and there's quite a few trees out in front. Like you're still going to be able to glide out to some landing fields, but it's not really my, you know, once you are ready to go to Elk, you'll probably know because you've been flying a bunch of the rest of the team range already. So I wouldn't add that to my first try. You know, I think it was quite a while before we started going to elk all the time. I think we were not going to elk. Like going to elk was actually a bit of a noteworthy. Hey, someone went to elk today, you know. And now we do it all the time. But got to be a little careful because there is these big gaps in people who've got thousands of hours and are comfortable doing something, and then people who are just learning and they don't realize that. You know, I may have done 100 of these, and so I'm comfortable going there really low or in less than optimal conditions. Is there any other particular things in the Fraser Valley that people have questions about, like other sites or other
Can you
routes?
show from Benny?
Yeah. So Woodside to Benny especially, but I'll do it that way. I'll talk about going to Woodside and then also talk about Benny in particular. But like Woodside to Benny, I very much think of as a earlier in the year type thing, right? Because to get away safely, it's actually another number I use quite a lot in the Fraser Valley. If you've got 1,400 meters and it's light winds and it's fairly early in the day, like I would actually say when I'm thinking about a good April flight at Woodside, I'm actually thinking about launching at noon and doing this first transition at 12:30, right? So that's why I always laugh a little bit when I see people showing up and they're just thinking about, you know, getting ready, and I'm already on my first glide, right? And it's, you know, Woodside's so good early in the morning, take advantage of it. And if you want to do this flight, you can see the wind coming across here, and a lot of times if you can get across before the wind, and then you get onto this mountain we call the Sasquatch, just because it's above the Sasquatch basically. And these bumps work surprisingly well. As a newer XC pilot, and even as an experienced pilot, like if I get lift and it's a good feeling piece of lift, even if it doesn't make sense, you're like, why is this here, right? Don't get so picky that you fly through it. I've seen people fly through lift because they're like, I can tell they were thinking, it can't be that good, it's coming off a lake. Well, it's actually probably triggering from the other side or whatever, but I've had climbs here that have taken me so high that I actually glided in over top of all the other people who were scratching later on. So don't be too picky, and like if it doesn't make sense, hey, that's part of flying, you know? Like you're always trying to build that mental model of how things are working, where the wind is going, and sometimes you're wrong. Like some days you'll come down here and there'll be still a little bit of outflow, and you'll actually bench soar up this side. I've done that before, you know?
So talk about the LZs when they do that first crossing. What are they?
So you've got the golf course has a script they use for inviting people in their planes. They don't really like us using it, but if you land there and then don't walk out right past them, if you can land there and walk out to the highway, they seem to be okay with it.
Don't land on the greens.
Yeah, don't land on the greens. And if you see another plane, really try to be aware of the air traffic that uses that area. You can also land on this area here, right next to the first bump there, right close to the Sasquatch pub. But that's once again, it's another thing that's only earlier in the year. It's underwater now, right? And it actually does a funny thing where the grass is quite tall, and you think, oh, there's grass still there. And then you look in there, oh, it's very shiny grass because there's like this much water in there. So that's why I get really excited about XC in April in the Fraser Valley. You know, and at this time of year it gets more tricky, more restrictive, right? So.
Question: so can you say again about the airfield there, like the protocol?
Yeah, it's a grass strip. It's not a controlled air thing or anything like that. Yeah.
But you said don't let in the greens. What's the greens?
The greens are actually where the guys are putting when they're playing golf.
The golf course is right beside it.
Yeah.
It's like a gravel path.
You know the really pretty green ring that just says land here?
With your flag.
Golf courses, like I've landed on a few of them around the world. Like if you land on the fairway where there's, the big long green parts, but if you land on the you've never played golf, like where they actually have the flag, if you land right on that part, they spend $30,000 on those greens, and if you put your boot into it, make a hole, they'll be really upset. So,
Wheel tracks or whatever. They want to whack it.
Alex, what's your altitude you like to try and transition from Woodside?
Once again, 1,400, same kind of number, yeah. You know, I've done it as low as 1,100 and even lower, and it's possible. But all that kind of stuff depends on, like, if you get your climb, like some days when you're leaving Woodside, you can sit there and like actually get a cloud climb over here, right? And then all of a sudden you're already a half kilometer, a kilometer off, and it makes a big difference, you know? So like 1400 is very conservative now with today's gliders.
Leaving
Yeah.
at.
Leading at, yeah.
What would you arrive at the other side?
You know, if you arrive, I've always found that if you arrive above these with any height, you've got a dang good chance, right? If you, I've arrived halfway down these, climbed back up them, and then like literally hopped from one to one. And it actually, even when the westerly comes in, this front side actually becomes ridge soarable. It's a little bit scrubby crosswind on this one, and then you can ridge soar up here, and then you have to push your speed bar to get onto the next one, and then you can soar over here. I did it once when like the whole bay was like windy, right? So it is possible to do it on a windy west day.
And there's a few bomb out spots in the back of that bay.
Yeah, the landings in here wouldn't be pretty.
No, I meant at the end of the Harrison.
Yeah, the problem with these ones is they've cleared some more stuff here for like the reserve, but the ones that are on the beach here, they're going to be lee side if there's any west wind, right? Like if it's a light day, no problem, but if you're getting there late and you're doing this ridge soaring along thing, you have to consider that these ones may be rotor pits, you know?
None of these will work for a hang
I
glider.
point out that just because you're watching, okay, start off with, really watch for air traffic making that junction over the Sasquatch. Not so much that you might be seeing somebody taking off or landing, so don't focus on the strip. A lot of people are just shooting approaches. They're coming in from Chilliwack, they're coming in from Tit Meadows, they're doing a series of approaches to various little private unregulated airstrips. And a lot of guys just shoot approaches in there. So the difference between someone shooting an approach to an uncontrolled strip like that or landing at an uncontrolled strip like that is the landing aircraft would be lower. The guy shooting the approach would be higher and faster. It's very common to see traffic coming through there. You really can't land at that strip facing south with a high performance aircraft. So you're going to be landing north and landing long, usually tailwind coming around that corner. So anybody who's shooting approach is shooting at a higher speed coming south. And because that's a corner, you're blind. So he'll be at 500 to 800 feet, and if you decide to give up on the Sasquatch and come back to the strip, you have the potential for a head-on. So you have to really keep your eyes open for traffic coming around the corner, along with the VFR tourist traffic, which is trying to stay low, look at the scenery, and coming around that corner. It's very active.
Martin's absolutely right. Like that is very busy. I've seen lots of people there. I've actually had my closest calls actually out in this area and crossing back in here, right? Like anytime you're away from the mountains and you're crossing flat areas, like it's ridiculous. Like even Riverside, I've actually had like, you know, sometimes if you glide out over Riverside, over the river, like you'll see a plane go underneath you.
Coming back late in the day from Bridal too is another real challenge.
Yeah, so you really, the Fraser Valley, it's one of the main reasons I've always had bright colored gliders, because I want them to see me, you know, and we're very visible. I often hear them before I see them, you know, so try to be aware of that. Pedro did ask about hang glider LZs for this thing. This earlier in the year, you could land here earlier in the day. It's big flat beach, but you'd want to do it without west wind. Yeah, if you're doing that crossing early in the day, and the nice thing about doing this whole area early in the day is it's in the sun, right? I don't really consider this a very good do it at 4 or 5 o'clock most of the time.
You can almost always sneak back.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is instead of trying to find a sketchy LZ in the bay, you can almost always, if you know that little hill that you're talking about, yes, it can work, but you can also get stuck there.
Yeah.
Very rarely does it work and then a thermal breaks off and then climbs and climbs and climbs. Yeah, you can ridge soar, but you're stuck.
Yeah.
You're never going to get above it.
It is a bit of an advanced move, like to go. That's why I was saying that this isn't definitely a first XC type thing, because, you know, I pushed in here, got up ridge soar here. It's in west wind. I don't have many LZs. That's a fairly full-on type activity.
But you can
know?
bail when you figure out, you know what, this isn't working. Yeah. You can bail and head back east.
There's landing fields right where it says Harrison here.
Big fields.
Big fields.
Yeah.
And you know, for doing something like that, bailing, like giving up on it, just pick a number. Figure the number that works for your glider. You know, I have a number which I know will bring me back to the campsite, north of the campsite. south of the campsite if I need to, no matter what. And that's a number you really pay close attention to all through that part of the trek when it first bumps in. Because if you've got that number in your head and you put a little bit of a buffer on it, a little higher than what you think is a safe number, nothing wrong with turning back and going back to it.
And actually, like if you're boating around here and you've gotten really high and you've never even had a look at that, gliding out and having a look at it and then going, no, I don't think so. That guy just landed at the base, and then coming back and landing at the ranch. That's cool. You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Just flying out and coming back.
Yeah,
just like preparing for an XC. Just go out towards Sasquatch and come back. Get a feel for what that.
There's kind of like pre-XC moves, you know, like doing these glides, going downwind, going over the back to harvest here. Like Jim actually pointed this out to me, and I couldn't believe how much we had to go out. But Jim, because he's often there in the middle of the day flying tandems, discovered that when you're ridge soaring here and it's windy, right? If you want to go over to harvest and arrive as high as possible so you can ridge soar the bump, if you go out and push out over the river and then follow the river down, you will actually arrive way higher than people who just skim the South Knoll and then kind of go over here, and even though that's a much shorter track, right? Because you just get a little bit of a sinky line, and really, long glides are often about the line you get. It's not about, oh, I bought a glider and it has this glide ratio, or or something like that. So much of it is picking the right line. And if you're a half kilometer out over the water here and you got no sink and it's like 0.9 down or 1 down, and you've got all the tailwind pushing you there, you'll arrive 500 feet higher. I remember doing this once. Someone took the shortcut line and I just kept pushing out till I was bored, right? And then I turned and I ran. And I got here and I was so high over here that I had to sink down to start ridge soaring in, because I was so high above the ridge lip. So there's lots of things you can learn just on doing things that don't seem like a big deal.
Has harvest changed?
They haven't done their hops yet, so we're still landing in the field.
Still there.
Yeah.
But there was an alternate setup, wasn't
There is an alternative down there by the bank.
West.
Right. If you put
Right by that
there,
bank.
this field is
Those two, yeah.
Yeah. So you're saying, sorry, this one?
Yeah.
This one there?
Yeah. This is the levee that is coming all the way.
That's the dike. Yeah.
The dike. So you come into the harvest,
So-
drive down here, drive there, and it's right there.
That's normally the normal harvest one. And so he's saying, yeah, drive. If you're going to pick someone up, you drive down past
No,
there.
this is the one.
Yeah.
It's quite visible from when you're coming flying.
There is an airport there too. There's an
Oh
airstrip.
yeah. Yeah, like down here somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's deceiving because you always land southwest at Harvest and at that other dike road. But when you land at the foot of Hopyard Hill,
Yeah.
you're landing, it's downwind, right? It's really weird. Like the wind is never right in there.
Okay. Yeah.
But
We've
it'd be
had-
longer glide for like if you're landing hang glider, you got a big field.
Yeah.
Now,
Luckily, Harvest is still good in terms of being available to us, and it's usually fantastic at Harvest. Like it's a great hang glider field. Like I would say, there's no field in front of the mountain that are actually as smooth as that one. Right?
Now, if you want to start with a hang glider doing some XC, would it make more sense launch from Benny and go back to Woodside?
That can work, but here we'll go over to Benny and I'll show you. Flying from Benny south, there aren't, there's that Allen Lake section where it's a little thin for LZs.
I just want to point something out. If you do that little top from Woodside over towards the Sasquatch,
Yeah.
basically any double surface glider like the sports and things like that, when you head across there and you get on the lee side of that little Iraq Mountain,
Yeah.
quite often you'll get beat up a little bit. You
Okay.
get some turbulence there. And when you get to those little bumps just above the Sasquatch, if you leave with a double surface glider the height of that little hump,
Yeah.
if you visually turn and you look and you can see the top of that, you will make it back. Unless something really weird happens, you'll make it back to our regular LZ.
Yeah.
With lots on it.
Yeah, the hang glider LZ.
You're coming with a tailwind pretty much.
12 to 1 aircraft.
actually remember what you were talking about. I remember doing that in a hang glider and dolphin flying along here to the old hang glider LZ, and it does work. Yeah, it's definitely achievable. And you were talking about, like, I'll just get you all the way to Benny. Like this area here earlier in the day is reasonable, and really, if it's a good enough day, you'll probably get 200 or 300 meters higher because the mountains are higher. And so you'll be above Sasquatch, and you'll come around here. If it's a really good day, you can fly right on the spine. If it's not as good, you can kind of do it all on the front side. But you can see how east this faces. Later in the day, you'll get almost nothing here. Like, just give up on it. Like, you'll have to glide. If you get up high here, if you're coming back, you'll have to glide to Sasquatch to get a climb, right? So this bowl later in the day is really not all that good unless you're on top of the ridges. And keep that in mind. And also, when you are coming this way, I've had it quite a few times, and especially if you leave a little late and the west wind is building like it will be, this time of year quite typically, you'll end up, let me see if I can zoom one more.
DeRoche washing machine.
Yeah, exactly. So here's Big Nick Mountain. Once you're at Big Nick Mountain, you're home free. But getting from like DeRoche around this one and then around the corner of Nickerman, I think you took a big whack there once.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Fun in there.
yeah, you really do have to watch the building west. And I've actually been up here, got high, maybe it was the day he took a big whack, and I just turned around and ran back. Like, it's just like, yeah, the west is building up. It's not as good a day, or we're a little late, or the west wind's just strong enough that it's not a great option. So definitely be aware of that going around here. There's a reason we don't actually launch at DeRoche. We had a launch there. It just wasn't a great place for a variety of reasons. I've flown through this area 30 or 40 times, and you do get good climbs here, but I wouldn't say it's one of the best spots, And with west wind, it becomes pretty unpleasant pretty quickly.
Is it DeRoche a little bit?
Well, you might be thinking Dudney. Dudney's way out here, and DeRoche is the one that's actually above where the highway crosses.
There it is.
And yeah, so there's the town of DeRoche, where you can get a scary pizza. Yeah,
That's DeRoche Mountain, your mark?
DeRoche Mountain's up here. That's what it's saying. Yeah. So if you are early enough and you've gotten all the way around, that's great. When you get to Big Nick, it's a high mountain. You'll probably be as high as you have been on the flight. If it's April, watch out for the number 1981, because that's the height you're not allowed to go over. That's 6,500 feet. So you do have to be aware in April that going over 2,000 meters, you got to stay below 1981. Anything over 6,500, you're definitely in WestJet's area. So actually, by this point, if WestJet's going into Abbotsford, they'll be below you out in the middle of the valley. There's another excellent, like I've been on Big Nick and I've seen the GPS approach WestJet uses. By that point, they're in the middle of the valley and they're below you if you're really high on the mountain. So spending a lot of times in the middle of the valley really high is definitely a bit risky. So getting around Dudney can also be a problem, right? Because at Big Nick, once again, at that west is building, getting around here can be tough. I've even tried to shortcut it by going across Pattison here. And that's, there's lots of landing fields out here for any type of aircraft. That's the old Little Nick launch. So once you're here, if you come from Woodside, now you've got a big west face, and running up these, if you've done all the hard work of getting here, running up to Benny is usually quite doable. Unless it's shady up at Benny because it hasn't cleared up that valley. But talking about flying in the Benny area in general, right? This is the ridge up here, and the actual high launch at Benny is here, and the low launch that Al's working on is in here.
Yeah.
And there's that little Davis Lake, and this is Allen Lake down here. It's a private lake, and they don't even though there's a gate there, and even though there's a place to land. Not really a hang glider LZ, and they don't want paragliders in there either. So that hasn't changed, has it?
That hasn't changed, and it's full of water right now. But there's a bunch of little ones for paragliders, not so great for hingies.
Yeah, you see Allen Lake. It's just right on the road. You can see it when you're driving up to Benny. And there's actually quite a high fence there, and you can actually crawl underneath the fence if you need to. But there's.
How do you know that?
Sorry?
How do you know that?
I've looked at it You see that? This is the thing though. It's actually important. Like when you're driving around, you're thinking about going XC. Show up an hour or two early. Drive around, have a look at places. Because I remember when we first started flying up there, we were looking at all these LZs and driving around, and there are some small holes, but it's not a particularly windy area of the valley. So even though they're surrounded by big trees, you can probably land in them. But really, the only landing fields that are really particularly good are like Danny Virtues or the Dyke LZ, the main LZ up there. So from a hang glider point of view, like if you're starting at Benny and you're going down here, you guys have more performance. So, you know, if you do this first crossing, the first crossing still has LZs right below it, right?
Yeah.
So no problem there. Get up high on this mountain, and from high here, you guys can probably start making the other LZs that are further south down here, right? And you have to get past this bump really before you start getting other LZs. There's one LZ down here, unfortunately, near the Durio School that has a little, like a training hill in it. We can't land in that one, right? When you're driving up there, you'll see at the Durio School here, you'll actually see, it'll be somewhere in here. Where was it relative to that? This is it. This big LZ, so there's Durio Elementary. I've landed in this one. There's horses back here, you gotta be careful of that. This one, unfortunately, it's got a training hill. That's actually a nice slope. It would actually be a pretty cool place for flying training, but he doesn't want us landing here. Once you start getting out, like, there's some berries and other things in here, but once you start getting out to here, you get a bit more options, and these guys all the way past the gravel pit, like out in the corner, have been quite friendly in the past, but once you get all the way out to this area, they've been pretty friendly.
Yeah, we've got permission from all of those guys. There's some people in the corner, right around by the other rock quarry. That's a nice big LZ. I'm just thinking for hangies. The school's fine to land on, and they're pretty tight behind the school. They're pretty open. The school's good for paragliders. For hangies, it might be a bit tight. But yeah, that's probably your best option other than the Virtue LZ for landing right below launch.
And folks, don't forget that there's a site in here called Little Nick. I've had a couple good flights up here this year. Yeah. If people are going to look at flying Little Nick, like one of the things I would first say is you can see that it's got a little bit of a backstop of Sumas Mountain here, and it's quite steep. So it does blow out. I wouldn't show up there with my paraglider at like 3 o'clock. When it blows out, it's very steep, so it roars in the trees, and as soon as you pull on your risers, you're airborne. So I usually, if I hike and fly there, there's a beautiful trail to hike up. I'm on launch at noon, and I like to watch it build, and then when I think it's soarable, I launch right away. But and that's a good hang gliding site. Like, it's steep and it's still pretty clear. Like, it's.
Can you still drive out to it?
I think someone had a vehicle on launch recently.
John Wyland did.
Yeah.
They drove right there.
So yeah.
Can you comment on the direct route from Sasquatch to Benny?
Yeah.
There's a few track logs that do it, but it's not the norm.
Well, most of the time it would be done from Benny to Sasquatch because it would be with the wind, right? So, like, I've certainly cut, like, this is called Rose Mountain, and I've cut from basically in here, and I know Martin does it a lot. He cuts the corner a lot. And actually, this is the Norrish Valley, so that's the drive up the Norrish, and there's Little Nick. And there's actually, for a paraglider, if you're willing to land in logging slash like with roads, you can land actually in here. There's quite a few places. I've actually landed a couple once up here. And yeah, like going from here to somewhere in here and then coming over the back, I did that once and it was actually surprisingly easy and fast. But you have to be prepared. There's a locked gate at a water treatment plant up there. So if you land way up here, you may have a 10 to 15 takeoff. So just be prepared for that. And you have to be of the mindset that you're comfortable landing in, like, go have a look at the logging slashes below Woodside at the bottom. If you would consider landing in that place, then that's what you're going to be looking at.
Also, minimum altitudes. we don't go over there unless we're like 1600, like over 14 for sure. And then we can make rows and then make the next bump. And then usually we're okay because we don't really feel like walking down the door, so we don't have to.
Yeah, like like I went in there with Al years ago just to check it out once, and it wasn't a very good day. If you're not getting significantly above the terrain, and the terrain here is higher, so that's why Al's saying 16. It's a good kind of thing because you don't want to be trying to go over these things when you're barely higher than
I
these.
actually point out the maximum you can go because that gets us a pretty small window. That's
Yeah,
the challenge.
1981 is your maximum in that area, guys. So, you know, it's quite easy on a good day to be back in somewhere here fighting to stay underneath that. So,
And they're so bad.
But just look out of the valley wind so that you don't have that kind of
it is awesome, yeah. And like if you fly all the way from Woodside around here, right, and then you get up to Benny, right, and you maybe have a poke up here and come back, yeah, it's way quicker. And like, yeah, the valley winds can be scrubbing all of this, and that's in the shade. It's a good way to go. It makes a lot of sense. And as he points out, this is something that Hangglider or any XC pod should be considering is where are the valley winds and what are they doing later in the day. You generally don't want to fly in places with a ton of valley wind, right? Because it'll make it a ridge soaring fest. It won't be as high. Usually the thermals, like you could ridge soar at Little Nick sometimes and be getting to like 800 meters maximum. But if you're back on here, you could be at 1800 meters. Right, that's how much difference the difference between ridge soaring in a valley wind and being one range back on good climbs with where the feeders for the thermal site aren't being hammered by valley wind. So it's true, but you know, obviously, as you've watched, he's actually doing something that I was going to mention, that he's looking at track logs, and this is for hang gliders as well. Like, if you're curious about flying in places, have a look at the track logs, see how they did it, you know. And if you're at work and you're wondering, hey, today looks like a really good day, go look at XC Find even before they, you know, they do their flight, you know. And you can sort of see, okay, what did they do today? And so you can see what route did they take. And if you find it really interesting, you can go and actually find the track log on X Contest or Paragliding Forum. You know, I would say the people who are comfortable doing that, you don't really need to be I'm not a computer boffin by any means, trust me. But there's like being able to look at the various websites, like, you know, if I type in X Contest, you'll see that it's like, I don't have to do much other than that. You know, and it shows all your flights. You know, you can look at your flights, and you can do this on other people. Like, I can even see on here, like if I look at a flight of mine, and I'm curious about, hey, someone else was flying with me that day, right? Look right down here. Oh, I didn't put Peter there. But it'll often tell you your flying buddies, you know, and you can go click on their flights right away. You don't even have to go find them. And that can be super handy because if you're trying to figure out how they did something that you didn't do, you know, it's a good way to look at it.
That was your XC flight?
Yeah, and then you go and click on this little...
show us the heights that you were at.
So down here it actually shows you, down here it shows you heights above ground. And you can see there's a couple low saves and stuff like that. And you can still zoom this portion of the map, and then you can bring it along. It'll even show you where you were at that point. There's a ton of information in a track log, right? And I remember before we had track logs, right? Like you would just hear like hearsay from somebody. Oh, J.C. Hoshkorn flew this route, and everyone had a different story of how it was done, right? So putting up a track log is, you know, there's a bit of ego in it, but there's also, it's a huge gift to anyone else who wants to do those flights, right? Because I know guys in France and stuff who, like, because in France they have these trade routes, they know them really well, and I had some friends who were really technically apt. He just studied those flights, he did a lot of flying, and 2 years later he's doing 200K flights. Because he just knew the routes, he didn't make mistakes about when to go and what time of day, he figured all that stuff out. So, you know, this has everything, like, you know, what time did you launch, you know, how long did it take your first climb, you know. You can see it's low survival for a while, you know, before you start getting the high heights. And then you can start seeing later in the day, you start getting some better runs where you're staying high. And like, here's a nice little section at the end of the flight, you know. And then from there it was a big glide. I tried to find something at the end, but it was in a blue hole, so it wasn't much of an extension.
So Alex, actually I took your flight, and I put it on Google Earth.
Yeah.
And I was looking at your how much the thermals were leaning, your coring the thermals,
Yeah.
they were leaning over.
Yeah.
And which direction the wind was traveling.
Yeah.
And I was seeing what the trigger spots were.
Yeah. You can learn a lot from that. Like if you zoom in on a track log or put it up on, like if people don't know the type of if I go out of this thing, you see this thing here? It's called an IGC file. If you click that, you can download that IGC file, and then you can go and play with it in Google Earth. And IGC is just International Gliding Commission. So it basically means like that's the kind of file. Like you can get a KML file, which will also work in Google Earth. And they might, this one here will probably be, if I click on that, it'll probably be a KML file, or KMZ, right? They're similar type files, right? So that one there, that would probably want to play in Google Earth, right? So
yeah, that opens in Google Earth.
yeah,
Just look at it
opens automatically, and you can look at everything.
And all the milk runs and different triangles and all the Fraser Valley are on XC contests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like when I wanted to do like an XC in Benny or a different place for the first time, I just look at it, and one of the big things I would look at is how high did they go before they made their first glide across somewhere, and I would just keep that number. And okay, it looks like they went to 1,400 meters before they crossed the valley, and that just looking at these files have helped me a lot trying to figure out XC.
Did you guys remember?
I'd even go so far as putting in a Duorama. I don't know if you guys know Duorama.
Yeah.
Where you
Where's
can
the
really
Skyways
see it.
button?
I'm not seeing it.
I'm not seeing it because there's a thing called
Duorama.
Skyways.
Yeah,
It's
it's
out,
super
Andy.
See it three-dimensionally.
It's a different lookout.
Oh, but he used to have it on here
It's not
too.
XC
Compared to how you
XC plans.
Yeah, you
It
I love
does
I
on
love
PC.
Duorama, yeah.
That-
one day and we could see how each other.
Yeah, there's a thing that we're talking about called Skyways, and it actually overlays all the track logs that they're loaded for a given area, and it's
Press thermals. Press thermals. That's where it's hiding.
okay.
Press
Oh,
thermals.
now?
Go up one more.
There it is.
Here we go.
The girl is downstairs. Just talk to her.
Wait for it to load up.
Backlight.
Yeah, go May or something.
Oh no, there's Skyways. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
That's
So here you can see, like, if you want to look at milk runs, and this is what, as you can see, I'm getting help from the audience here, right? Like, you can even see, like, look at these ones. There's like flights that's way over the middle of nowhere here, right? But you can see where people do most of the run. So if you're a newer XC pilot, this gives you a roadmap of where you should probably do your first wing. If it's red, it means a lobotomized penguin can probably fly it. Right? Like I've actually flown, like on the right day, I remember I actually flew all the way to Goat and came back with no turns.
By the way, lobotomized penguin comes from a cartoon strip of Boone County. You gotta follow it to understand what a lobotomized
Martin's telling you I'm not an original joke.
Can you
I
show
thought
me
you were
some
really
of the Fraser
smart.
Valley, Alex?
Yeah, so we can drag this all the way down to the valley.
Thank you for
I think
coming.
you can actually see. You used to be able to see Dennis's flights. There's like here's Al's flight.
Yeah.
Right. So there's Al's flight from Benny. We can follow it all the way down to Benny over this. Like there's lots of landing fields for hang gliders in here if you like leaving your hang glider there and ordering a helicopter.
Yeah.
But you can see Woodside already, eh?
Yeah.
And you know how I was talking about these SAMIs, right?
Yeah.
Right. That shows you like areas that are really good for flying and have good what the French call aerology, which I think is actually quite a useful word. You know,
It's all the red, it's just Martin, the other Martin. And Alan.
So, you know, here you can see, and you can actually see the attempts, and like you can see all the glides back here. You know, so this is a really useful tool. You know, that Skyways thing. And you do this in some place like Annecy, and the whole area glows red. It's amazing. you know, for the tens of thousands of track logs. But you can see we're doing a pretty good job in here. You know, you can see there's the Benny launch. You can see people go down here. You know, and that's a pretty nice run to do.
You were talking about seasons, like good time of year for each site.
Yeah.
Does Benny have a particular?
Yeah, and so to talk about seasons, that's a good prompt, Tyler. Like I would say that like now is getting to be the time where for the bigger XCs, I expect to go to Pemberton, right? Like today was kind of blue and stable in the valley. It didn't look like much, right? And you know they flew 100K XCs in Pemberton, right? And that's what you expect later in the year in Europe because they can fly in so many places. They just sort of see it as earlier in the year you fly the foothills, later in the year you move up into the bigger mountains because you need to be higher. They go to places like Fiesch and stuff like that, like deep in the the Swiss Alps where it's really high. So that's and that's why we go to Golden when we do. We go to Golden in August because it's baked out and stable everywhere else. But Golden, you pretty much if you fly in Golden at this time of year, you're going to be dodging rain and there'll be some good days, but it won't be as consistent. So, yeah, understanding the cycle of the seasons and where to go, like that's why, like flying off Cheam, like it's not a long hike. If anyone's a keen, you don't have to be a keen hiking flyer to do that one. It's like an hour and a half with your glider. You can fly off Cheam if you get a light south wind at that kind of altitude. You can have an amazing flight where you get way above Cheam. You can even venture down that range. And when you turn around and bail over into the Fraser Valley, you can glide to Woodside with no other climbs.
You're saying it's an hour and a half hike up the front from Bridle?
No, from Spoon Lake Park.
Oh yeah, from the drive.
Yeah.
The long drive.
Yeah. That one.
The hike's short. The extreme drive part.
You pretty much want a driver. So find somebody from a hiking club who wants to go for a hike.
Waddington sometimes have extra seats as well.
Yeah, there's a guy called Mike Waddington. He runs.
We need some
Outdoors.
Sherpas if we want to fly this.
And if you're interested in doing that, if you look at Waddington Outdoors and call Sam Waddington, he's a pilot, and he a lot of times later in summer is taking people up there, and he'll actually take paraglider pilots quite happily.
So what's the month to do that?
I would say we probably still have snow back there, so any time after the snow melts, really. Like it can be good from July, August, September, but later in the year is probably going to be a little bit less crazy. Like if you go there July, it can be pretty strong. It can blow out on launch. We've had some excitement there, so doing it later in the year. And also the big thing with Cheam is I would always plan to launch before noon, like so you can get up there early because it can get strong and walking down with the ladder sucks. So. Yeah, I think Rob Samponius got pulled over the back of Cheam and almost thrown down into the Fraser Valley because it was quite windy on launch. Yeah, so
winter time too.
Yeah, people do it on snowshoes, if you want. But if it's got a lot of snow, you're not as likely to get a thermaling flight. And I'm kind of a sucker for thermaling flights. So,
do you want to show or tell people how to find track logs that go through a particular area?
I would cover that, but maybe I just want to do a couple more specific things because I really wanted to cover the Whistler Express in Pemberton, actually. So, going back to...
already? Doesn't look like it's light outside.
So, the milk run in Pemberton, you would have just seen it there, was basically from launch along Owl Ridge. This is Owl Ridge here. And then there's a bit of a gap here, not a problem for modern gliders. You get here quite low and you can still glide out on anything. This is actually a good place for hang gliders, like in terms of there's a lot of landable fields. In some ways, especially later in the year, I think it'd be nice to see hang gliders get up there a bit more because it was definitely, developed by hang gliders years ago. I remember when we went up there.
Well, the last 2 years, I have been skipping it because of the fires and the stupid things going on with LZ.
Yeah. Right now, the main LZ is not as hang glider friendly, but it depends on what kind of glider you've got. If you've got a single surface glider, like I'm sure Mark would have no problem landing in the Pemberton LZ as it is now. The ray field there is pretty good. Yeah.
It's a good LC. It's not the problem. It's just the switchiness of the wind down there a little bit
Well,
late in the day.
That's what I wanted to cover, is that I have strong memories of this when I was a new hang glider pilot. And what you do get, guys, is this thing called the Whistler Express. And if you're going to fly in Pemberton, you really want to understand this wind. It's not always entirely predictable, but if you look at the bigger picture, right, you can see there's an inlet, right, and from there there's obviously a crank and valley wind. It gets up to Whistler. Whistler's about 2,500 feet. Pemberton's like 1,000 feet, right? So it actually has to come over a pass. So it takes it a while to do it. But once the wind builds up enough, pressure and gets up far enough, it will come past Whistler and then splash down into Pemberton. And it is super nasty. But it's very localized. That's the good news. Is it comes over this pass, hits the ground here, right in the village of Pemberton. Like ground zero is the Petrocan. Like everyone who's been in Pemberton a few times will be in there at 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's like dust blowing across the Petrocan from the lots nearby. But if you go and land at the LZ, it'll probably be a little better. But if you go up the valley a bunch, it'll be fine. Totally 10 kilometers an hour, normal valley breeze, like normal breeze. And if you go up to Mount Currie and land up by the rodeo grounds, or even up by the festival grounds, it'll be much better. Or even the airport will be better. The main thing is, if you can kind of visualize it, the air's coming over, like it does this in Europe at Pass Tourne. It comes over a pass and hits. And when it hits, you don't want to be there. But if you go 5 kilometers, and if you get there and you realize it's doing that, the good thing is those winds are often lifty because they hit, and there's a lot of air, so and there's a lot of wind pushing you away. So just turn around, min-sync, and run away, right? Like, I'm a big fan of like landing safe. I don't care about 10K retrieve. Like I'll do it at Woodside, where I'll go and land at Harvest Market, and I'll see inexperienced pilots going and landing out in front of the mountain. And I'm like, what are you doing? It's blowing really strong. You've heard a couple bad reports. Is getting to your car that important? Right? I'd much rather have a relaxing landing field. And that goes, like the hang glider LZ is better, than the ranch or the Riverside when it's really windy. But still, I bet you it's better. It's better at Riverside. I mean, better at
There's days where 12 of us were flying there, 10 people went out front, 10 people broke turns, 2 people went to Harvest. It's beautiful.
No problem. Yeah.
Can
Don't land in front.
Yeah.
you predict, like during the day, can you go look at the weather forecast at Squamish and see the winds building, and then you have a good chance to know what's going to happen?
Actually, Canada RASP windgrams, actually not the windgrams, sorry, the map overlay plots. I don't know if it will have shown it for today. So you gotta, if you haven't played with these, they're super useful. This is the map of the area. And you can zoom in, and you can adjust the height of the wind, right, and the day and the time. So I'm at 120 meters, which is its lowest altitude. And today it didn't predict it very well, did it? There was some funky winds today up there, apparently on the ground. But there's days where, if you look at this map overlay, you'll see it go like purple. It'll go a really nasty color in here. Like it'll go past red, it'll go up to here, right? And you'll see it just in this one area around Pemberton, right? So that is one of the places I've seen it visualized and seen it predicted. Yeah, it's any day with southwest wind is much more likely, because the southwest wind is the same direction as that valley flow. So today they had southwest wind aloft, like you can see it's southwest wind there, down there at 120 meters. If we go up to 2,000 meters, you can see it was west wind, right? So any sort of form in south and west, if that's in the same direction as your valley wind, you have to expect stronger valley wind. And in a little known problem spot like this, you can expect it to be nasty. It's a real shame. I've seen so many people show up at Pemberton, have a great flight, be coming back, and if you hear it's just going off in the LZ, I just go and land up here by Pemberton Meadows, right? I've even been above the LZ, coming back to Tag Point, and they're like, oh, it's really windy down here, and I just run down to the village and land down here and find wind. So definitely, that's a key piece of local information for flying Pemberton happily.
Where do you land at the village?
The rodeo grounds, there's all kinds of fields up there. They don't seem to care that much. I've never had any issues up there.
Alex, you haven't eaten yet.
Well, yeah.
Why don't the hang gliders land at the airport? Because they can make it up there.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. Have you
I
thought
haven't
about that, Pedro?
experienced
I
yet.
thought you guys were.
I haven't experimented yet.
I'm not too pleased when you're there unless you're on aircraft radio.
Yeah. That would be a time maybe where you'd really want it, and you.
It's also like 10 to 1, I think, you took hand with it.
But it's actually less wind at the airport than it is at the
It's actually beautiful.
Yeah.
Pemberton, the Pemberton guys, they want us to report if we're going to land there, though. So that is one place where you want your airband.
Yeah.
Talking to the guys, just letting them know that.
And especially when we come to firefighting season, because they have a big firefighting base and they have a lot of helicopter activity. So if the hangings do go up there, you probably want to be on airband, or maybe even like if you didn't have it, you could call the the fire base operations and just say, hey, we're going to be landing a hang glider there. You know, might be some way to alert them.
Communicate first.
Yeah. And in Pemberton, the milk run is definitely out to goat and back, you know, or I'll show you. I won't talk too much more about Pemberton, but the run along Owl Ridge is actually not the sweetest part of the flight, you know. It's often, even early in the day, if there's southwest forecast, the wind will be kind of scrubbing along Owl Ridge and you're flying into it. And it's not epically bad, but if it's a southwesty day and you're not getting above the ridge, it can be a little unpleasant. So when you get around the corner and you get over to this area, this, in my mind, this area, Barber and Copperdome and 10 Keel Lakes, this is where all they do a lot of fly camping. That's awesome. Really high, way less wind. If you are at the point where you can go across and get here, do it, because that'll probably be the best part of your flight that day. And Goat Peak is, if you get out to about Goat Peak, just out over by this is the 25K mark. So if you fly out to Goat and fly back, you got a 50K out return. So going past Goat, like the landing fields for everyone, like the landing fields up here for hang gliders and everyone are fantastic. Like that's why it would be great to have the old Hurley launch because that would be a good place to get away from the Whistler Express. But going up further, like the 100K out and return, the landings up here are all like logging / landings on the side of the road, right? So it's definitely a little bit more ballsy. So I would say that. And also getting around this peak here is to get the 50K mark is not ugly. So I say doing that part of the run for when you're quite a bit more experienced. You know, unless it's an ideal day and everyone's on the radio saying, yeah, it's no winds, have a good time. But is there anything people want to cover that we're not covering? Like, is there things that people have any specific questions about any areas?
I would just say one thing you guys are talking about, looking at track logs and thinking about 1,400 feet and your meters and recording it. You really got to know what the conditions were on the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, any given day is different based on what you're seeing. There's no rules about a specific height or, you know, a specific corner. It doesn't always work. It works in this type of conditions. So you really got to know the day, and nothing beats experience, as you're saying.
Yeah, with flying, you always have to be, you have to always be very willing to change your plan very quickly, you know, and be flexible. And I mean, yesterday I had a flight at Pemberton. It was really windy and it wasn't very fun. So I went over to the Miller side and it was nice. It wasn't a very good climbs, but it wasn't windy and it wasn't rough, you know. And so I just had a mellow fly around. And if I pounded out along, you know, that Owl Ridge into 20 kilometers an hour wind, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as fun. So having the ability to switch it around and change your goals, like even if you're XC hungry, there's days to be like, no, that's not a today thing. Because as he says, like 1,400 meters might do it someday, 2,000 might not do it the next day, and it might be unpleasant to try. So you do want to be flexible for sure.
And if you're just starting out and learning, most of the time, if it's decent, you'll have other pilots that'll be doing it already. and it'll, like Alex said, don't chase from below, but if you can see what they've been doing, get high, then try to do it and not lag too far behind. It really helps.
Yeah, the other thing too is that, like I'll say it again, like get out flying a lot. Like if you have really high dreams, you need to match those dreams with practice, right? So if you look at it, you're only like, wow, I get less than 50 hours a year. That's not a lot of hours, you know. And if you want to increase things, one of the main things you need to do is get more airtime. And also, like I was saying to Craig on the way out, like I always admired Martin because he always launches early, right? And even as a new pilot, even though there's risk in launching early, especially at Woodside in the spring, some of the nicest and like mellow climbs when you're still a little rusty, if you get out there early, you're not in the heat of the day already, right? You get a nice mellow climb, it might be a little harder to stay up, you might take a little bit of a risk of sinking out, but ideally you'll get some practice when the day's warming up, and you'll be high when all the XC guys start going, and if you want to go with them, you're ready. If you're sitting on launch waiting for them to go, and then they go, and you go, okay, it's time. Actually, it's not time, it's 45 minutes too late, right? So I'd really encourage new pilots, even at the risk of having a couple sink outs, as soon as you think there's a good chance that you can stay up, get out there. Give it a shot, you know? Because, you know, pilots who become good pilots usually have a bit of go-for-itness, you know, and you've got to have a little bit of like, okay, I'm going to take a bit of risk of sinking out. Sinking out isn't hurting yourself. It's not a bad thing, you know? Like, it's not the kind of risk, not a bad type of risk. So that's a really useful thing. And, you know, and a couple other notes I have is just use speed bar when flying straight, you know? Like that's, I almost always have some form of speed bar on. If you're new to it, like just quarter bar, you'll feel your glider's a little different, sits in a little different place, like feels a bit different, you know? And can you use rear risers on it? And that's also one of the big reasons that pods are favored by XC pilots, is because pods are set up to sit on bar comfortably. If you're sitting up in a sit-up and bake harness and then you kind of put on bar, it's always, I always found, unless it was a laid-back harness, if your harness isn't very laid back, you end up being in this L position in a paraglider, and that's not aerodynamic and it's not comfortable, right? So that's another thing about getting your harness setting up, getting the right harness for what you want to do. Oh yeah, like another one. This is more like ground handling stuff, but hey, if you got a chance to go dune flying, that stuff will improve your overall flying, right? Don't be so focused on cross country that you're like, oh, you know, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take my cross country glider down there. You know, there was a time, like, how many times did we go down to Marina, you know? And we had a great time.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, all had a great time. We all took our regular gliders, so what, we got a little sand in them. Don't worry about it, you know? You bought your glider to use it, you know? And if you blow a launch because you're not good at launching and you rip your glider in half, well, yeah, it might not have any sand in it, but it's not saving you any money, right? So. Yeah.
Sorry, Alex, what's the dew flying line here?
Well, probably the closest stuff would be Cape Kiwanda and Oceanside down in Oregon. But actually, the other place that I think is the best place on the whole coastline, you know, barring Iquique, is Marina Beach or Sand City. It's down just south of Santa Rosa.
I was there. It isn't hiding.
Yeah.
And even closer guys,
There isn't a campground right there, but there's campgrounds in the area.
even closer guys, like we've been flying students up in Merrick, and there's a beautiful little hill with the right face. And it's just like dune flying. It's beautiful for paragliding on it.
Yeah, so we're wrapping up.
Thank you, Alex, for very good presentation.